Hello everyone, Alexa Donne here, and today I am going to be spilling some secrets of what it is really like being an author on Goodreads / what do authors really think about Goodreads? How does it work for authors? The secrets perhaps you do not know. Yes, this is inspired by some current conversations, and let's get out of the way at the beginning. Long established on my channel and other places as my opinion, reviews are for readers. Do not like author nonsense when it comes to authors and reviewers and Goodreads and replying and all that. But I was on a live stream on Mara's channel, Books Like Whoa, highly recommend, we'll link to down below, and we were having a grand old time in the chat talking about ancient Goodreads history and like lots of different dramas, and I was just like, hey, y'all want to know in the chat like why authors are like that sometimes with Goodreads, or how this works for authors? And everyone was like, tell us more. So here I am. Most of these are really low stakes things, but they could be really interesting to you that, like, essentially I'm gonna let you into the psyche of like the slightly tortured, sometimes a little too sensitive author, and why certain things on Goodreads like give us feelings that we should never act out on Twitter, publicly, anywhere, mind. You can't kind of let authors off the hook for their own personal responsibility, but maybe you'll be curious to hear just some of these funny things that just aren't as obvious until you are an author on Goodreads, which is actually where I want to start. Something that I think makes Goodreads really messy, that came up on Mara's stream, is that Goodreads is a very weird space. It's partly like you track what you're reading, but you review books, and a lot of bloggers use it as an essential platform for growing their own kind of spaces because they cross-post their reviews. It's also a social media site, or they want it to work like that, because authors can have blogs and you can like have your ratings and reading progress like auto share to different sites. There's really active networks of forums where people do book clubs, and there's the whole ecosystem of librarians on Goodreads, which is a whole other thing. But across the board, it's also just very poorly moderated, almost on purpose. Like Goodreads basically wants to leave you to your own devices and do your thing, and they basically let it be the wild, wild west of books. And on top of that, it has all sorts of really poor UI, user interface experience design, which we all have problems with. So I can tell you that authors have the same problems as readers have on Goodreads, because the thing to understand is we're also using Goodreads as readers, which gets very complicated. And in most cases, we have Goodreads accounts before we become authors. And what happens is when you get a book deal, as long as someone has created a page for your book, which librarians will do, you can always ask one to do it for you. When your deal announcement is made, is you claim your author page. So a book has to be on the system with your name, then you click on it and you have to prove that you are who you are, and then all of a sudden your Goodreads account will be converted to an author account, and from there you have the ability to edit your book information. When you write more books, you can create your own book pages. You won't need a librarian for that going forward. And you get a dashboard in the back end that basically, when you log in, you get your author dashboard, and it gives you your top line stats. Here are your books. Here are how many people have added them to read. Here are how many ratings you have. Here's your average rating across all your books. Here's your average rating for each book. There are like little clickable links. You can see who's currently reading. And so that's a snapshot of the author tools that you get when you become an author account. On top of that, you get, I'm pretty sure blogging is a function that only authors get, so you can blog if you want. Beyond that, a lot of the tools are exactly what readers have. I logged out of my author account to remind myself what it looked like when you have a regular reader account. So like the status updates and like the stats, anyone can see those, but you basically get a dashboard. And the thing is, like, Goodreads encourages authors to be on Goodreads. They encourage you to use your account actively. They want author participation. You get this like welcome post, and it does encourage you not to reply to reviews. I'm pretty sure that's in it. But otherwise, it's like you should blog and you should answer questions and you should engage with the Goodreads community as an author. And like, I think we get like a little check mark. Like, they incentivize authors creating their author accounts on Goodreads. They want authors in this space, which I think is important. So what happens most often is you're a reader first, you already had a Goodreads account, because like almost all of us are on Goodreads, and then all of a sudden you have an author account and things get really weird. So now you're engaging with Goodreads as an author. You have a book on there and you start to watch it. You start to like obsessively like click on your link, refresh the page because you want to see what your dashboard looks like, and you're like, oh my gosh, I have 100 to read ads and my book just went live, and you watch it over time and you compare yourself to other people. So this is part one of like how authors use Goodreads and part of our psyche. And that is just like obsessively refreshing your dashboard and checking your stats and tracking your stats. And there's always this kind of, well, so first of all, important to know that you're always gonna start, well, you start off with 0 stars and 0 ratings unless you or someone you know rates your book. And inevitably the first people to rate your book, whether it's you or not, and we'll talk about that, your agent, your CPs, friends, family. And so most books, way ahead of their arcs coming out, just like you have that 5-star rating based on very little, and you just kind of sit there, and then it's always bracing yourself for that moment when the real reader responses start coming in with arcs. Though asterisk, we're gonna talk about trolls too, and why authors maybe go a little bonkers sometimes. But meaning from there, it's literally inevitable, and maybe some authors don't realize this and this is why they lose their minds, but it's literally just math, averages. Goodreads uses averages, and the star rating system is flawed, and they don't allow half stars or partial ratings. It's all aggregate from 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 stars, and everything's always pulling toward the middle because that's what an average is, and your rating's gonna fall inevitably. So about star rating your own book, this is just like the author secret of that this is a social norm that has really changed, but it ebbs and flows and it's different for every person. Don't judge an author who 5 stars their books, especially in the past, because it legit used to be the norm, like in debut groups, like that is what you did, that you 5-starred your own book to just give it that extra little push from when inevitably real reviews rolled in, you know, you give that one extra 5-star rating to try to buoy it up. And it's a social norm, and I see debuts still do it. I have chosen not to do it going forward from the first book. It's something I did on my debut, but I say like go easy on authors. It's not because they're egomaniacs, I promise you. It's because you see your ratings start to fall, and the only thing that really raises a rating is a 5-star review. If you want to like know why we get so like nitty gritty on it, anything lower than a 5 usually brings a rating down, even if infinitesimally, but over time, the only thing that's really gonna raise it is enough 5 stars to like nudge it up. And so it's like every 5-star review counts. And also, this is another kind of secret that you might already know, like it's just author bro code, okay? If you are friends with an author, like actually friends with them, if you're a regular reviewer, speak your truth, you 5-star their book. That is just like author norms, because it's a nice thing that you can do for a fellow author, and then you are expected to also 5-star their book should you read it. Asterisk, some authors will just drop 5s when they haven't read the book. I don't do that, but just so you know, like that's like author bro code, and that's why you 5-star your family, friends / author friends books, which is also why you as the reader, this is part of the secret, look at who is leaving 5-star reviews. In the long run, yes, but also just in the beginning, because really you can't trust them. And like, we know that you can't trust them, and like a smart author wants there to be a real spread of reviews, but just like FYI. So when I see a buzzy upcoming book and I see that all of the like most liked 5-star reviews toward the top of the page are by people who I know are authors / their friends, I'm like, they followed author code, but their reviews are meaningless, basically. It's part of the ecosystem. So let's actually talk about liking reviews on the main page. This is the other secret. This is a thing that came up in the live chat where I was like, FYI, because someone was like, authors should just filter their pages so that they can't see their negative reviews. They don't see them, they can't lose their shit. And I was like, well, that only goes so far, because the thing about Goodreads, I mean, you might have noticed this as a reader, they have they basically glue reviews to the top that are the most liked reviews. And that is the default view on any book page on Goodreads. And so if the most liked review is a 1-star pan, that is gonna be sitting at the top in default view, and default view resets every time you visit the page. If only Goodreads ever edited their UI to make it a better experience for everyone involved. And imagine if they did actually give authors the ability to have like a default my view to their book page. Imagine how much better the world might be. But no, there's a universal default page. And so as an author, at a certain point, I'll tell you personally, I just don't go on certainly my debut page. I haven't looked at my second book page in such a long time, because don't tempt fate that I don't know what the top pinned review is essentially. But on my debut, it's a 1-star review, a comedic 1-star review. And even to like navigate to the page to look at the filters, to only look at positive reviews, to like hide the low-star ones for myself, it's not possible, because the first thing I see when I even go to do that filtering is that 1-star review, which automatically like triggers this like sick feeling of like, because you relive the experience of reading that really scathing comedic 1-star review, and then you feel your feelings privately, mind you, and you don't like do anything about it. But like, I choose not to experience that deja vu, so I literally can't even go on the page. So just FYI to readers, some authors, that's the problem. It's not even just like, well, only read your good reviews. The bad ones are right there in front of your face. And so you, as a reader, as a fan, if you like a book, the best thing you can do is like the positive reviews, like the ones you want to be glued to the top of a book's page. But here, humans, and I've done this as a reader too, we're entertained by negative reviews, and we just have to accept that that is part of the ecosystem of Goodreads, and that we create that ecosystem. We reward the book reviewers who hate almost everything they read, and they put funny gifs in their reviews, though that does feel like an era that is slightly faded from its heyday in like 2012 to 2015, but it's still like a thing, and you have to take responsibility. Like, we, the readers who like those funny reviews, funny mean reviews, we put them right in front of the author's face should they choose to navigate to their book page. So at a certain point, I personally find the answer is an author can't even look at their book page. They can't scroll past like the top part, because you're gonna see it. So just like a fun fact, just if you didn't know, giveaways actually cost money. They didn't always cost money, but Goodreads needed to monetize that platform, so they've cost money for the last like 2 or 3 years. So if you see a book that has a giveaway, someone is paying for that, usually the publisher, but sometimes the author. So just FYI, that is something that costs money to get that kind of exposure on Goodreads. And so as an author, just picture some of us behind the scenes with the FOMO of, my publisher doesn't love me enough to pay for a giveaway, or I am too cheap to pay for a giveaway. So just bear that in mind, just a fun fact. Oh, another just like fun fact of what it's like to be an author on Goodreads, what it feels like. You will inevitably get private messages from people, and this is just a general thing I hate about Goodreads. This is just reader or author. I hate how you have to physically go into a message for it to be marked read. Otherwise that red flag haunts you forever on the top bar, and I'm like an inbox 0 person. Like, seeing a notification that's not marked as read drives me bonkers. But Goodreads just has a terrible UI, so you have to click into it. So you're actually gonna have to look at these messages, which kind of sucks. You will inevitably get a wide variety of messages from people demanding free copies of your book. Sometimes they'll like nag your book, or like nag you if you don't respond to give you a free copy. You get those like, give me a free copy of your book for exposure. I've literally gotten those after the book is on sale, and it's like, that's really not how it works. Why? So just like FYI, you'd be amazed what messages people will send authors. By and large, it's okay. I don't mean, it's not like a massive problem, but it does happen. Oh, so this is another secret that came up on the live stream that is related to that. So another thing you get when you become an author on Goodreads is people can submit anonymous questions, Q&A, on your books. And you can do that, by the way, on any of the books that you're on. But I find by and large, the average book, and especially when you're a newer author, readers don't really use that function on Goodreads that much. But here's the double-edged sword as an author. The Goodreads algorithm preferences people who use that function, who answer those questions. It's considered engagement. And anytime an author answers a question on their book page, or sometimes because you can also ask it on author profiles like generic questions, it's gonna bump them on the algorithm. So their answer is gonna appear in feeds on dashboards. I know this because I've seen this from when I've seen authors answering questions. And so my secret is, I'll tell you, at least in my experience, unless you're a big popular book, readers just don't submit that many questions. It's just not that common. Like, you might get a stray, like with the Ivies, finally I got like a stray one or two. But even though I have a decent platform, I'm decent on YouTube, I've never gotten that many questions on Goodreads, and certainly not ones that were answerable. I've gotten almost like private questions that should have been PM'd to me, asked in my Q&A box, and I can't really answer them because it makes them public, and they're like weird questions that aren't appropriate to answer. So my secret is, trust me, when you see anyone who's a new author, like a debut author and so on, who just, they seem to have like really incisive, thoughtful questions asked on their page, and they get to answer them and it bumps them up in the algorithm, those authors are very likely having their friends ask them those questions. That's just kind of my secret. Like, and that's my conspiracy theory, because like I'm pretty sure that's the only way they're getting that volume of perfectly asked questions that enable the author to basically reply with a marketing and promo message that magically appears in people's feeds and is on the book page. So the next thing, just so you get a glimpse of things that drive authors bunker on Goodreads, and you're like, doesn't matter, and I'm like, doesn't matter, but then I'm like, it matters, I guess, to me. Lists. The frustration of lists, which also brings up the UI, we all know this, the search function on Goodreads effing sucks, generally speaking, but also this means that I find, certainly as a reader, and so I assume other readers are similar, the lists that people curate on Goodreads and on which books appear can actually be important in terms of promotional tools, because readers may browse some of those lists to be like, oh, so what are the mysteries and thrillers coming out in 2021? I browsed one of those recently in order to create a list for a video I'm going to do of upcoming releases. And so those lists matter, and your placement on those lists matter, because a lot of people will only look at the first page of results for a list. And so you get into, you're just gonna be like, wow, authors are so neurotic and weird, but I'm gonna tell you about the experiences you have related to Goodreads lists. So first of all, an author cannot add their own book to a Goodreads list. You have to get someone else to do it. So step one is that feeling of shame that washes over you when you have to beg one of your friends to put your book on a list. That's step one. Step two is the deep well of shame of trying to get enough votes on your book on any given list so that it appears in a good spot on the list, so you're not number 257 on the lists of best YA teen thrillers or sci-fi books or retellings or what have you. These are clearly personal examples, but it is something that I hate doing, and I know I'm not the only person. So the secret here is legitimately the only way to get enough votes to do well on lists like that. So always bear this in mind when you are looking at any debut books list, buzzy books list, upcoming books, best books. The only way to really move the needle there, if you're not already popular with a ton of fans, so like Sarah J. Maas is never gonna have a problem being at the top of a list because her fans use Goodreads and they're very engaged in the Goodreads ecosystem, so they upvote that book all the freaking time. The rest of us just don't have that kind of fan base power on Goodreads, so we have to beg other people to do it for us. And so this, honestly, this comes down to how bold you're feeling, pushing down your shame and embarrassment, having to ask friends to do this, how many friends you have who you know actively use Goodreads. But the real secret is that there are authors who are just very, very good. They are in Slacks or Discords or what have you with large groups of authors. This happens in debut groups too. And they basically do like a vote for vote. And not always, but sometimes in author communities at least. But it's like, it's how many people they know, how popular they are, and how willing they are to ask a large group of people to basically vote bomb their book to get it to the top. Authors with street teams are at an advantage here too, because they can literally get their street teams, every single member of their street team, to vote their book up. So bear that in mind, that there are authors such as myself who don't like doing that, who don't feel comfortable doing that, who, you know, maybe I'm number 11 on a list and the book that's number 1 is number 1 because that author has a street team. So that's just a secret for you. And it sounds so stupid, and yet you really want to be one of the, I think it's the 4 thumbnails that appear the first 4 book covers of a list. That's always a big boost. But generally you want to be on the first page. Top 10, top 20 is even better because of how far someone's realistically going to scroll to look through a list to get recs and ideas. So yeah, there's the politics of Goodreads lists, and it can drive you barmy. So again, if you have an author / a book that you really, really like, the best thing you can do in terms of supporting them on Goodreads is like reviews that you think are good, 3 stars and up-ish, of their book on their page, so that it's more likely to get sticky toward the top of the default page, and vote for their book on lists. Add their book to lists and vote for them. That is just like a nice little thing you can do. Okay, so let's talk about ratings some more and why they're a hot freaking mess. And like, we all know this also as readers, because if you are a reader and you have an account on Goodreads, and like, it's always like, well, what is a 3-star to me? What is a 4-star? Do I give 2 stars? Like, it's this whole ass mess. And the half-star round up, round down, it can sometimes just be how you're feeling that day. It's always tricky. But yeah, ratings on Goodreads are a whole ass mess. And what gets really sticky for authors, this is again your view into the author psyche, as I already kind of mentioned. Inevitably, it's always the slow march downward of your average Goodreads rating. And you're like, why does that matter? And I'm like, I know, right? And why it matters is that it matters to some people. I have legit had people make comments to me, well, your books clearly just aren't that good because they're under an average 4-star rating on Goodreads. And that's when I start to pull out my hair, because it's like, a lot of books that a lot of people like are under 4 stars on Goodreads. Do you know how easy it is to fall below an average 4 stars on Goodreads? Incredibly easy. It just means that a large chunk of the audience gave it 3 stars, 4 stars. So they liked it, but they didn't like absolutely love it. You don't have a ton of 5 stars, but very often, like, yeah, you might be a little lower, but it doesn't mean like, oh, it's below because people really don't like this book. No, it just means most people liked it okay, but didn't like absolutely love it. And that's pretty normal. But that is to say, just digging into ratings, so that's just like the top line of it. But the other thing is that a lot of people take ratings at face value far too easily. So this is just getting into like the nitty-gritty of author frustrations that I know I have, but I know other people have too. And that is that people pay attention to the wrong thing. They look at that average rating to determine how good a book is. They're like, oh, well, the average star rating of this book coming out is like 4.5, that must mean it's really good. Yeah, or it means that they're really buzzy and a lot of people like the author, may not have even read the book, and so they were bombed with 5 stars. You can be review bombed on either end, by the way. Lots of 1 stars, which is always messy, but I've also seen buzzy books review bombed with 5 stars by people who clearly didn't read it but want to support the author, which is a really lovely gesture, but really misleading on the book. So what I urge you to pay attention is not simply the average rating, but actual reviews. Written reviews are usually the best sign that someone read the book. And really that you shouldn't rely on star ratings, period. You should actually read the reviews, because the other phenomenon I've seen, it's always like maddening and you feel gaslit by Goodreads, where you read, say, a 5-star review on a book and you're reading it and you're like, this isn't a 5-star review. This is not actually that glowing. This reads like a 3-star review, but they didn't want to give it 3 stars. I've also read some classic 3-star reviews. So 3-star reviews are actually my favorite reviews to read as a reader. Kind of as an author, like you always wish it was a 4-star review if it's a 3, but like as a reader, I find 3-star reviews really useful to read. because it gives you like a little bit of both ends, and I find that 3-star reviewers are more likely to give you lots of context about like what they liked and didn't like about a book. So the phenomenon of reading a 3-star review where you're reading it and you're like, this is a 1-star review. It's not even balanced. It's like they clearly didn't like it, but they'll throw in one line about how like, oh, but you know, I appreciate what the author was trying to do, 3 stars, which more power to them. They are allowed to do that, but I caution you to actually read reviews, because I have seen books with inflated ratings where if you actually read the reviews, they're either so fluff positive to the point that you're not sure they read it, or they don't leave a review at all. But you read the 3- and 4-star reviews and you just feel gaslit, because you're like, these don't sound like 3- and 4-star reviews if 3 and 4 stars means that you really enjoyed a book a lot. And so it's basically every reviewer has a different rating system. Some reviewers are more generous than others, and people have lots of different reasons for rating a book what they rate it. And it's not always just the book itself. People will sometimes rate higher or lower depending on the author, depending on whether they're an author. I already told you that 9 times out of 10, there's bro code, author bro code. So, how honest can an author, this gets how honest are my reviews? They're honest, but I disclaim this, I am more generous with star ratings than I would be if I weren't an author sometimes, but I always try to provide context about what I thought about the book and how I arrived where I arrived, so that is honest. So generally my advice is to actually read the reviews on a book to get an aggregate of what people really think about it, rather than go by that average rating. But that average rating is something that drives authors a little barmy, if you couldn't tell, because reviewing is just so subjective. This all comes down to the fact that reviews aren't for authors, they're for readers. But I'm also just telling you this contextually as a reader. You should be reading reviews critically as a reader. I do when I'm reading reviews as a reader to find books to read. So you can just look for those patterns, because what I'm saying is there's just a lot of bullshit that goes on Goodreads in both directions. Like, we've all seen a book where we're pretty sure their rating is inflated, but we've also all seen a book that we thought was pretty decent, but it's a very divisive book. It's a love or hate book, and so there's a lot more lower ratings on that book, and we feel, well, if it were us, that would have a higher average rating. So it really runs the gamut. And the last thing I want to bring your attention to here that is very important is ratios. This is another thing a lot of people don't pay attention to on Goodreads that authors pay attention to, partly because our dashboard shows us this data. And once you see Goodreads data like that in the dashboard, all of a sudden you're forensically accounting other books in a way that you never did as a reader. So this is another secret. It's never simply just, this is the average rating based on everyone who has rated or reviewed the book. You should actually look at the numbers, because the numbers are important. As I already mentioned, it's easy to have a really highly rated book if you don't have that many reviews, and most of the people who have reviewed it already like you. You're gonna have a higher rating. Sometimes a really high rating, if you look at the ratio of people who have added it to their shelves, specifically the red shelf, and either reviewed or rated it, which is also separate systems. Like, anyone can rate a book, but I also like to pay attention to number of actual written reviews, because that gives you a much better metric of how many people are actually reading a book, and of course what they think about it. But sometimes a really highly rated book that only has, let's say, 40 ratings and 15 reviews, it hasn't hit a critical mass yet. Not enough people have actually read it and reviewed or rated it for that to be a real critical consensus, if that makes sense. So something else to pay attention to, so I mentioned the review thing. As I said, so another thing that can be maddening on Goodreads when you play the comparison game, which I know you shouldn't play, but the whole point of this is author secrets and some of the things that some of us do, and that is there are juggernauts on Goodreads that have so many ads and so many people put them on their shelves and they're really buzzy, but if you actually compare them to other books, it can be fascinating sometimes, the disparity. And it's the question, is it a tree falls in the wood kind of question? What's better? Having far more people know about your book and buy your book, and you'd argue, yeah, that one, because you get more sales, or people who actually reading your book and liking your book. Because a phenomenon I have observed personally is, yeah, that book is huge and sold a ton of copies, but if you track the Goodreads stats on some titles, it doesn't seem like people are actually reading the books. And you can tell because they don't ever rate or review it, but especially review it. Because remember, I mentioned anyone can rate a book, including as like a goodwill, like, hey, supporting this book. There's almost like a social cachet in rating certain books and like proving that like you love that popular book essentially. But it's a totally different story actually reading it and reviewing it. And so again, basically I encourage you not to look at top line stats, but to actually see how many reviews the book has. And what do they actually say? That is more substantive and important. And these are the stupid things that drive authors a little mad. But, well, actually, let's talk about 4 stars and 4.5 stars. And then we'll circle back to why ultimately this all comes down to authors not being nonsense. So this is just like another author secret that isn't a secret, and it's completely irrational, but I'm just telling you, to a lot of authors, a 4-star is a bad review. And I know that that's insane. I don't feel that way. Would I always prefer to have a 5-star if I get a 4-star? Yeah, obviously. Remember when I mentioned how basically anything but a 5-star inevitably is gonna drag your rating down, and that's just, it's like gravity. It's like there's like lead weights attached to your book and it's just sinking and sinking. But a 5-star is like a buoy. It's a buoy. But I love 4-star reviews because like if you think rationally, 3-star reviews too, you go rationally, that means they liked the book. But authors aren't rational. So that is why some authors, and I don't condone this, lose their shit if they get anything less than a 5-star review. Anything less than a 5-star review feels like harm because it does technically drag your rating down. It's all very stupid. So I'm telling you that this is an irrational feeling that a lot of authors have, but ultimately really not your problem. But just so you know why some authors, But reviews aren't for authors, and you should never respond. So people go, well, you shouldn't be on Goodreads. So this brings me to my conclusion. I feel like that's the, oh, I haven't talked about trolls. Okay. I'll talk about trolls and then I'll talk about why some authors can't leave Goodreads. But should, honestly should. So troll reviews are real. So this is another kind of behind the scenes thing that can contribute to authors seemingly being just very sensitive, irrational creatures. But it's very real. Troll ratings are real. Troll reviews are real, but especially ratings. Inevitably, you're gonna end up in a position where someone just dislikes you enough to review bomb, to rating bomb your book. It's like you've arrived, honestly. And what sucks about Goodreads, because again, Goodreads doesn't moderate anything and they don't really have guidelines they follow, or they follow them like giant hypocrites, because I'll tell you about removing these reviews. And so this is also like a psychological warfare thing that's happening for authors. I think like it's fair to say real people are gonna read your book and they're gonna have a variety of opinions and they're allowed to have those opinions. But then you get the reviews where they didn't read the book and they just wanna mess with you. So they're gonna give it 1 star. I have literally, cause you can poke around, there have literally been accounts created. Like I can see their creation date and I can see that they've only ever rated 2 books and they did it in the last week and they're mine. And they gave them 1 star. I'm not stupid. I know you hate me from YouTube. Now you gotta get used to that. But trust me, especially the first time it happens, it really blows. I've also gotten really sassy reviews that are just like essentially, I don't like her on YouTube. Well, this was, I didn't like this 1 star, or what have you. But meaning like, you have to get used to that there are going to be people who are going to basically weaponize Goodreads, that they're going to weaponize low star ratings or reviews on Goodreads just to mess with authors. I've had friends this has happened to. There's one particular friend, literally they rejected someone in author mentor match and this person went on a crusade to dunk them on Goodreads, create multiple stock accounts just to 1-star their book on Goodreads. So now we get into reporting. They literally titled their account like that they hated the author, and Goodreads still wouldn't remove those reviews. I had a situation where I could tell, like I could prove, I'm like, this is someone who doesn't like me from YouTube and specifically created their account just to 1-star my books. This isn't a real review, obviously. And I honestly had let it go, and the only reason I reached out to Goodreads is because a different friend of mine had troll reviews ratings successfully removed from her book pre-release. So she was like, you should email Goodreads help. They helped me. Yeah, they ignored my email. It's completely arbitrary. So we're hearing that people are review bombing this Lauren Huff, the author who's the topic du jour. Well, they don't do that most of the time. Good for her that they're removing her review bombs, but Goodreads is just incredibly arbitrary. So the perspective of an author is like, Goodreads is it can be a really awful space. And so now we can get into, so why are you on Goodreads? Like, you shouldn't be on Goodreads, leave Goodreads. I think it's complicated, as I mentioned. A lot of us were readers on Goodreads first, or still are also readers on Goodreads. Goodreads encourages authors to create accounts and encourages them to engage on their platform. Goodreads wants authors on their platform. It's really messed up. But yeah, we should honestly just leave Goodreads. We shouldn't be on Goodreads. Like, my advice generally that I've given before to authors is, if you can't handle this, get the heck off Goodreads. A lot of publishers will indeed advise their authors, just stay off Goodreads. It's better that way. And I do agree with that. But now you just have a perspective of how it feels once you're an author on Goodreads. It's mostly like the maddeningness of like looking at your dashboard and like analyzing numbers and looking at other pages and conspiracy theories about basically how like Goodreads gaslights you, and it's all a little maddening. But at the end of the day, this is all. It is still, even though authors are encouraged to be on there, it's a reviewer space. It is a space that belongs to reviewers and readers. That's the spirit in which it was started. It's how I joined Goodreads. And it really is on the author to back the F away. Like, talk to your private group chat about how maddening that troll review was, or like, look, this is another aspect of trolls. Like, this has happened to me, where you get a 1-star rating and literally no one has the book. It's literally not possible for them to have read the book. And that was the one that I had reached out to Goodreads about that they didn't care about. I'm like, literally, there are no copies of this book available for a single soul to read other than my critique partners. This is not a real rating. Goodreads doesn't care. And people do that all the time. It's arbitrary. And so just like, yeah, as readers, we should put less stock in the whole average rating thing. I still think it's a good tool. I like actually reading reviews, but every book is gonna have like a different barometer of how useful the reviews are, because it depends on how kind of the aggregate reviewer space has decided to approach this book. Some books just, they get ragged on more. Some books, they get a free pass for various things. It depends. So Goodreads is a really maddening space. But I do, the double-edged sword I think is like, as an author, because they give you control over your book information, you are the only person, otherwise you're at the mercy of librarians who can put the most accurate information about your books on the book's Goodread page. Books need Goodread pages. Like, it's good to have that aggregate reader space because it is for readers, and Goodreads can be a really good tool. So I guess I say have your Goodreads, but go on it as little as humanly possible. I still refresh that page more than I should. Oh, another random thing that hadn't really come up until my new book, but just another thing you can conceptualize that authors like have to deal with, and it's a little maddening. I'm now at the point where I've gotten negative reviews based on how other people have shelved my book. And so it's like this aspect that's out of your control. Like, all it takes is one blogger on Goodreads to shelve your book as something because they think your book is that way, or they have a shelf with that title, so they put your book on it for whatever reason. And then other readers will look at other people's shelves and how people shelve books it's a discoverability thing to find other things to read. So if you are on a shelf and someone then reads your book and is like, it didn't live up to my expectations because it was shelved here, Yeah, that's it's like a long list of all the things that are out of your control. And then they blame the author, and it's like, I never said the book was that thing. So just now, you know, all of these author feelings. I feel like this is an interesting topic. Let's talk about it down below in the comments. Like, Goodreads, man, horrible UI, but really the best solution for it. And I know that people have floated alternatives to Goodreads, and I just can't be arsed to join any of them because I'm so, like many of us, deeply entrenched in Goodreads. If only they cared more about their UI, but they don't. They're owned by Amazon, which also is bad, and they don't care that their dinosaur website has a lot of problems. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. I will make more discussion style videos about topics in writing and publishing, and if you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and happy writing, and if you're an author, stay off of Goodreads as much as humanly possible.